wasn't a blonde and I was on the cover of Vogue. It was significant. I'm Shalom Harlow, and this is my life in looks. Here I am at Marc Jacobs' seminal runway show for Perry Ellis. This was an absolute affront to the fashion establishment at the time. This was very inspired by the grunge scene in Seattle, and this is how we were all dressing on the streets. I looked like this in my off hours, layers on layers, prints on prints, skirts over pants, lots of florals. This was the early 90s, the beginning of the grunge movement. And us youth realized the world we were inheriting was going to be multinational corporate run, and we intentionally didn't want to embrace labels that had already been established. And so we found our clothes on, the streets and vintage stores and made it our own. And this is where Marc got his inspiration. Wow, it's quite an epic image. Grace Coddington is off camera, right? Such a genius stylist trick. She's fluffing the train so it'll have that incredible arch to it. Hey, look who it is. It's Shalamber. That's what we call ourselves. We started calling ourselves that then, Shalom and Amber. It would be at least once a week that somebody would, not once a week, multiple times a day during the shows that somebody would call me Amber and her Shalom. We were interchangeable at a certain point. Those days also, you didn't get confirmed for a Vogue cover. They would do cover tries, and we would be booked to do a day of just strictly cover shoot pictures, and you would shoot 2 or 3 possible cover tries, and then they would decide. Oh, this is so special for me. I love this series of photographs. I shot this with Irving Penn, Mr. Penn, as we called him. We were in an atelier, an old artist studio in Paris. The walls were crumbling down, as you can see the texture behind the walls. People pay money to make that happen in their bathrooms now. This was just legitimately there. This was actually pretty scandalous, this story. They revoked all these Vogues off of the supermarket stands in the South because there's one photograph of me from the side. You can see a little bit of side boob, and that was scandalous. The feeling that I had with that photograph was that I was a young bride-to-be that was about to step into her wedding dress, and the innocence of that moment and that precious passage. It was shocking to me when I heard the news that it was being banned all throughout the South, because it really was so naive. Mr. Penn was known for micromanaging his models in terms of their body language and their movements. And from what I understand, he did that from the beginning of his career. Even in the 50s with those models, he would come up and physically move them the way he wanted to position them. After a couple of times of working with me, he must have decided that my body language was sufficient enough for his standards. So I did not get micromanaged. I got encouraged to move, and that was a privilege. Oh, she is so saucy. Now you have to realize the Todd Oldham show, it was like a New York scene. This was mid-90s. It was just like packed full. And so the encouragement that you would get on that stage to really let your inner freak flag fly was, it was hot. The music was pumping, and I was definitely feeling it. There's some video footage of me overtaking Amber on the runway, which was, everybody makes it into some like, oh, they must have had a little bit of a bitch moment. It was not anything like that at all. It's just, I had a fast clip. I was just feeling the music and walking, and I overtook her. She was extra slouchy that day. She was moving slower than usual. And you can see as we're walking back, I turn to her and I say a few things. The first thing I say is, keep up with me. And then you see me turn and say something else to her. I was like, okay, now turn. So we turned in unison. There's a lot of stories. I really love this moment. I love working with Todd. My first American Vogue cover. To have a brunette on the cover of Vogue was actually kind of semi-revolutionary. I wasn't a blonde and I was on the cover of Vogue. It was significant. Mid-90s minimalist chic. Well, That's an iconic moment for sure. I landed in London straight off the red eye, was shown some rotating platform and told I was gonna stand on it while I got sprayed in spray paint, and that was the download. That's all the information I got. There was no rehearsal. I didn't hear the music. I did not know the amount of time, sequence that would be involved. This was purely spontaneously improvised, every moment of it. So what you saw was my first instinct responding to the moment. I'm so good with jumping off a cliff into the unknown. I'm kind of more comfortable like that than having too much information. Fashion obviously is a visual art. The piece of music, I think, informed the moment incredibly. The lighting design and just the way that the space held this moment as well. The audience was like wrapped around in a semicircular arena kind of feeling. So he was conjuring a moment and creating it to be. This is taken from the set of Head Over Heels, a romantic comedy that I did in the late 90s. My character, Jade, is one of 3 supermodels that live in an apartment together, and a normal girl moves in with us, and we witness what we think is a murder, and it becomes like a comedic murder mystery, kind of like a Scooby-Doo episode though. Originally, they had a different stylist on set creating the wardrobe for the looks, and I made a bit of noise. It wasn't quite up to par. So they hired like a legitimate stylist to come in, and she got it right. And she allowed me and all of us to kind of create our characters, knowing that it needed to be, that the outfits had to communicate a level of ridiculousness in order for the comedy in it all to land. This is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. This part was written for me last minute as I got rearranged in the cast list, and they kind of just like made me an appendage to Michelle's character. We were the antagonists as usual because we were beautiful. Ooh. This is the Met Ball. I loved getting ready for this. Traditionally, the Met, you're invited to it by a design house. And one year, a group of us women decided that we were gonna buy our own table so that we could dress ourselves the way we wanted to. I found this gorgeous old Bob Mackie vintage cape, slinked myself into a little Nina Ricci bodysuit, and draped myself in some fabulous diamonds, and off I went. There's a particular thing about presenting the look the designer has and their particular aesthetic, and then there's another thing of like how you want to show yourself. And this year it was model as muse. It's felt particularly important that year to be authentically representing how we wanted to portray ourselves. In terms of model as muse and like what our particular role is as contributors, I don't know that it's something that can really be articulated because it is so ephemeral, but there's definitely a talent and a craft to it. And just being able to point a iPhone and take a selfie doesn't make you a supermodel. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, well, this became a moment beyond the scope of what I could have ever imagined. This was my return to modeling after 10 years of an illness in which I recovered from late stage Lyme and severe black mold poisoning. And so I was not working for close to 10 years. And the first jobs that I did was for Donatella, for Versace. I walked the runway, and then I did this ad campaign afterwards with Steven. And this was when I first understood the power of the internet. This is the video that broke the internet that week. I was just doing what I do on set and moving the way that I felt moved by that particular outfit. The bodysuit just like made me do this particular dance that then became, you know, everywhere. I think most people thought that my smile was responding to that stimuli of welcome, and that was some of it, but it really, the smile was coming from an inner place of I am well enough and I've achieved coming back to the place that I was before this illness took my life away. So that smile was for my own inner achievement. What's next? What is next? the Met Gala, the red bow of all red bows. I think this red bow was 18 feet on both sides, 14 feet. Maybe it started out as 18 and then they cut it back. I said, this needs to come off. And they all looked at me blankly and I said, how am I gonna go to the loo? I can't do that with this bow. You make the bow detachable, rule number 1. Number 2, you've gotta make friends everywhere you go because somebody's gotta help untangle you every 3rd or 4th step. I mean, you inevitably get wrapped around strangers or pillars. It's sort of like Wonder Woman's lasso. Again, just like wheeled them in. Bow is a little unwieldy, but it's looking fantastic in this photograph. And I think at this point, what's really reflected is I just really do feel a lot of inner joy that I have my health recovered. And then to be able to walk the red carpet and a gorgeous Ralph Lauren with that insanely elegant bow, how can you not radiate happiness? And what do we have next? Oh, they made the streets of New York City the runway. It was an incredible fanfare of athletes and different performers and a lot of incredible energy. And the finale of that whole extravaganza was us models walking the streets, and I got to lead the pack to Madonna's Vogue, Vogue, Vogue. The video of this is really kind of special because the crescendo of the music building, my body just took over and my arms found themselves in the air. And I think you can see a real earnest moment of feeling inspired and feeling the collective joy and celebration on the streets. It was really easy to embody that and reflect it back to the audience. I want this one to sit her down and just kind of give her a hug and tell her it's gonna be okay. And if we can think of ourselves as our sweet younger selves, even in the now, like eventually my hair will be gray and I'll even have more capacity for self-empathy. So I'm a sweet little me now too. And that was my life in looks.